Hi everyone, welcome back to So Arizona. I am planting a few seeds while we chit chat today, although today really isn't about seed starting per se. It's more about garden planning and the importance of it. And this has been something on my mind because I am finishing up with this season's summer garden, and I'm also thinking about planning my fall and winter garden here. And so I was just thinking about how important it is to plan, because I am making a few changes both to my fall and winter garden as well as to next spring and summer's garden. So I thought some of the things that I've been thinking about might be helpful for you too. Depending on where you are, you may still be right in the midst of summer, or you may be winding down and thinking more about fall as well. But either way, I think that garden planning is always a great thing to think about before you're into that current season's garden. So first of all, I want to talk about a couple of changes that I am going to be making to my summer garden next year. I just spilled kale seeds all over my lap, and I cannot even stand to just waste seeds, so I'm trying to pick them all off here. Okay. Anyway, so if you are growing in a small space, I have got a new free resource for you. You can find it in my store on my website. You just add it to your cart and you can check out normally, but the price is $0, so you can't beat that. And it's just a little free guide on some of the things that will give you the biggest bang for your buck with growing in a small space, both with the amount that you can harvest as well as the flavor that it will bring to your kitchen. So if you're growing in a small space, you can check that out if you would like. I think you'll find it helpful. I shared some varieties with you, some specific favorite varieties that I have of certain kinds of crops in that guide. So I will leave the link down below. Check that out if you would like. One of the big changes that I am making for next summer's garden is planting things for me. So this season, I have no regrets about growing out some things for Seed Savers Exchange, and also just with some experimentation that I did. I think going into next year, I really want to start focusing on just growing some things for myself that I really love, just focusing on not experimenting as much, and just growing things that are some of our favorites. And these are things that I've been thinking about because of some of the questioning actually that I have been posing to you in our fall seed starting series, and that is, do you like things? Are they worth growing? Are they better than the grocery store? And so some of those things really got me thinking about what I want to do next year in my spring and summer garden. And one of those things has to do with my corn and pumpkin and beans, my three sisters garden bed. So this year I had planted popcorn and some Seed Savers Exchange pumpkins, as well as some Hidatsa red beans in that bed. And I have no regrets about that. I've had a few troubles with my pumpkins, as you all know, but I think I've gotten that straightened out. It was definitely an overwatering issue. I had shared that in a recent short on YouTube and on Instagram, that I had turned off the water in the bed completely, and the new growth on that pumpkin is amazing. It has been really green and lush and healthy. So I definitely think that it was an overwatering issue between the irrigation that I was supplying as well as the heavy monsoon rains. It was just crazy amounts of water coming down from the sky. So I really think that that was the issue for sure. As I was looking at that bed and thinking about what I want to plant next year, I really think that I'm going to be prioritizing sweet corn next year. So it is going to be all about sweet corn. I don't mind planting extra. It's just TJ and I, but I don't mind planting extra at all because I can always cut it off the cob and I can blanch and freeze it really easily. I actually got a few questions about what blanching is in my last video, and sometimes when you garden and you cook a lot, you kind of take for granted the things that you know, and you forget that maybe people are in a different space in life and maybe have less experience than you in a certain area. So I wanted to clarify what that is for those of you who aren't sure. So when you blanch something, what you're doing is you're trying to preserve texture and color. And so if you bring water to a boil and then you add whatever vegetable or leafy green that is for a couple of minutes, and then you take it out and you immediately put it into an ice water bath to cool it down and stop the cooking process, then that will help preserve it and preserve the texture and the color as you freeze it. And so from there you can just put it in some kind of a storage container, a Ziploc bag, and then you can just go from there and put it in your freezer. So it's just about color and texture. It will destroy or inactivate the enzymes that are in some of those leaves and things that will damage the color as you freeze it, and it's just not very appetizing. You could totally just throw stuff into the freezer, but the texture might be a little bit weird and the color will definitely be weird. So that's why you do that. Anyway, I am planning to grow a lot more sweet corn next year just because I love it so much, and I am going to be then blanching it and freezing it in my freezer for later. And in that bed also, I'm going to grow pumpkins again, and I'm going to be growing two of my favorite varieties of pumpkins or squash. And so I'm not going to be doing any grow outs for anybody else next year, and I'm going to be sharing what those varieties are next summer. So just stay tuned for that. Some of what I'm thinking is a result of the fact that I did not plant enough onions or garlic last fall. So the fall before that, which would be 2 seasons ago, I planted so much garlic that I harvested 46 pounds of garlic, and that was a little too much for us. We cook a lot with garlic. There's no danger of vampires in this house for sure, but it was still too much for us. And so I dialed it back last fall, and I planted about half as much. But I found that that wasn't enough garlic for us. We will definitely run out before I harvest our future garlic next spring. So I'm going to be planting a little more garlic this year than I did last year. So I'm going to be adjusting that. And the other thing that we are going to run out of this year is onions, storage onions. So again, 2 seasons ago, I planted so many onions that we just could not use them all. So I dialed back and I planted less, but I found that I planted too few onions. So this year I'm going to be upping that amount a little bit. And because of that, I need to think about how much bed space I have for all of the onions and the garlic that I want to grow. And then the other thing that I'm going to be planting more of are leafy greens and beets and carrots. And all of those things are things that we use constantly in the kitchen. So all of that to say, I'm looking around at my garden beds and I'm wondering what I need to dial back in order to have enough space for the things that are really, really important for me in the kitchen. And so just like with that line of questioning during the seed starting series, is it worth growing? Does it taste better? Is it a high value item for you? I'm asking myself all of those questions as well. And when I look at things like broccoli and cauliflower, which have proven to be a bit tricky for me to grow here in the Southwest, just because our temperatures in the wintertime are so inconsistent. Last winter was much too warm and I got a really poor crop of those things. And then when I try to think about the value of broccoli or cauliflower in comparison to what I can get at the store, I'm just not finding that the flavor or the price are really worthwhile for me taking up space in my garden beds at the expense of growing things that are more important to me for my kitchen, like more onions, more garlic, more leafy greens. So I am going to be planting much less of some things like broccoli and cauliflower. I think that I am going to be planting less cabbage, but more so the change with the cabbage is I'm going to be planting more of the smaller, more compact varieties. So I just planted some of the Caraflex F1 and some of the Tiara F1 cabbages that I got from Johnny's Seeds. The Tiara F1 is a 50 to 60 days to germination, and for the Caraflex it's 70 to 75 days. So I'm going to have one that's a little earlier, one that's a bit later, but both of them are really compact and they do really well in small spaces. So I grew the Tiara F1 in my stock tank garden a couple years ago and it did really, really well. So I'm going to be concentrating more on smaller varieties of cabbages, much less of some of the brassicas like the broccoli and the cauliflower, and I'm going to be prioritizing my space, like I said, for garlic, onions, and leafy greens, and some of the root vegetables like carrots and beets. And I also want to grow a few more potatoes this year. So really it's about what is going on in the kitchen, what things we eat the most of, what things I feel like have the most flavor and so therefore have more value to me. So I think that list of things is definitely more valuable to me, both in flavor and in price. So as you're planting your fall and winter garden and your spring and summer garden, think about the kinds of vegetables that you really look forward to coming into season. What do you look forward to buying at the farmer's market? Or what do you look forward to the grocery store in your area carrying that they don't carry all year round? So for me, it's things like watermelon in the summertime or garlic in the wintertime, because I just cannot find the varieties of certain things that I really love to cook with certain times of the year. So when you're making your list, think about those things that you look forward to the most, that you can't get all the time, and maybe carve out a space for those and maybe do a little less of other things. The other change that I'm going to be making is doing more block planting. So instead of a lot of mixed beds where I have a lot of different things going on, I am going to be doing more concentrated blocks of certain varieties. I did some of that just this season as well, and I had talked about that last fall, about kind of changing what I was doing and planting less of mixed beds and more of, specific varieties in each bed. And I'm going to continue on with that because I really liked how that turned out in some of the beds. I found that they were easier to manage. And when you're growing in a garden and you have lots of different garden beds, whether it be raised beds or in-ground beds or containers, those things are so close together that I really don't think that pest pressure is going to increase that much, because I've got 2 or 3 feet away another bed with another variety of things growing. So I've got beneficial insects and I've got pollinators being attracted to many different beds that are really close together. So it's just easier for me to plant an entire bed of tomatoes or an entire row of peppers or an entire row of cabbages or onions or garlic, things like that. So it's just easier for me to manage. I've got a couple of really big projects that I'm concentrating on for this fall and winter and into the spring that I'm trying to get ready for you all. And that is proving to be a lot of work. It's taking up a lot of my time and attention. A lot of my mental energy has been focused on that. So being able to come out and think, okay, I'm gonna go take care of the tomato bed right now, or I'm gonna go take care of the kale bed right now, or what have you, that takes a lot less energy for me to try to organize in my mind and keep on track of. So those are some of the changes that I'm gonna be making. So again, focusing on the things that I cook that are really valuable to me and leaving off the rest. And then simplifying my bed plan. So just simplifying what I've got going on in each bed. So those are some of the changes I am making. Another thing that I am doing right now here with the seed starting is I am actually planting in some of these small little containers. These are kind of the size of a mushroom container. I got these containers from Bootstrap Farms, and they've got some really good products for seed starting. Another thing that I like about these little trays is that I've got some older seeds. I've been sharing with you guys a lot that I have got quite a few older seeds. And when I was checking on my lettuce seedlings just earlier in the week, I noticed that I had some poor germination on a couple of varieties. And I expected that because some of those seeds were pretty old. So I had to sow some more. So I thought what would be helpful is, instead of taking up space and time to just sow individual cells of those seeds that I know are older for things like lettuce that really don't have a long viability time, that instead I would sow in some of these little trays, and I would sow them really densely, and that way the poor germination wouldn't matter so much. Whatever is good seed would come up, and then I could separate it after that. So if you've got some packets of older seed, don't waste your time in your space. Just sow them in a little bit smaller space, and then whatever comes up and germinates well, you can then up pot once it gets its second set of true leaves or primary leaves, and then you can up pot those into a bigger container and go from there, and that will probably be more time efficient for you. In one of these standard trays, I can fit 8 of these, so I've got 8 different varieties that I am growing in here, and I'm just sowing these in blocks and they will sprout up and grow. So I've got kale and lettuce and cabbage in these, and they're going to sprout up and they're going to grow all together, and once they get maybe their second set of true leaves, then I will up pot them into a bigger container. And I'm doing this just because, again, this is a lot less time consuming. I've already planted all 8 of these, so I've got 8 varieties planted that are going to equal probably over 100 plants, and I've done that in just a couple of minutes while I'm talking to you. And yes, it will take a little extra time later on to up pot them, but not as much time as trying to fill and then plant each individual seedling tray for me. So this is another thing that I am doing. I planted a lot of individual seedling trays that are growing in the house, and I want to show those to you. They're doing so well, y'all. They're some of the ones that I planted during some of our chit chats during the fall gardening series. And so I've got a lot of lettuces growing, a lot of cabbages, some brassicas, I've got some Swiss chard, and a lot of different things, and they are just looking really, really cute. Just darling little plants for sure. So I have been working on succession sowing this week. So I've got some extra seeds that I have planted. It's been a couple of weeks. So every couple of weeks I am planting just a handful of new seeds. Once I transplant out the first seedlings, I'll be doing that in mid-September. Then I will have other seedlings that are a bit smaller that I've planted over the last few weeks. And so every week I can just plant out maybe 4 or 5 seedlings. And I find that succession sowing like that just takes a few minutes every couple of weeks, and then a few minutes every couple of weeks to then set out the new seedlings. So it's really, really much easier for me to manage than planting them all at once. And let's be honest, who can deal with 25 heads of lettuce at the same time? And doing it that way really is much more time efficient. It just takes me a few minutes for each thing every couple of weeks, rather than having to spend an entire afternoon sowing seeds or planting seeds out. And then I waste a lot less too, because since it is just TJ and I, there's only so much lettuce or kale that I can harvest every week. So we're just trying to make sure that we plant as much as we need, and maybe a bit extra for certain things that we want to try to preserve. This season is all about trying to really focus on what is important for me, and also what I have coming up in my work schedule, so that I can continue the garden, so that I can continue cooking really good meals, but I can also have time and mental energy to focus on some of the projects that are coming up for me. And I was thinking about that, and how no matter what season of life you're in or what reason you have for wanting to be more time efficient in the garden, it's always a great idea. Whether you are a little bit older and maybe have some health problems or some mobility issues, it may be that simplifying things, whether it be growing just in a few containers or stock tanks or raised beds or whatever you're using, just being able to organize those in a specific way is really, really helpful, I think. And also I think it's really important to take the shoulds and ought tos out of gardening. You have no obligation to grow any specific thing other than what you like to eat and what you like to cook and grow. If you are growing a garden that is a flower garden, that's just for the sheer enjoyment of it, because you like watching the creatures, the butterflies, the bees, the birds in that garden, or you just really enjoy looking at the color and the blooms, then that garden is serving its purpose for you. And if you are growing a garden so that you can supplement your kitchen and grow a few extra things, and it's small and you're okay with that, then that garden is serving its purpose for you. And if you want to grow a really sprawling garden and you want to try to grow as much food as you can, then that garden is serving its purpose for you. So it really just depends on why you're gardening. So having a successful garden for you depends on why you're gardening, and that is going to look different for everyone. So if you are growing just for flowers, that's not wasteful. You know, if you want to grow and use your space and your water and your resources and time for that, that is completely fine. I think it's maybe just my personality or my background, but I've struggled in the past with, you know, feeling like I ought to or I should do X, Y, and Z, whether it be in the garden or in my life in general. And I found at this point in my life, maybe it's my age and my experience, that ought tos and shoulds really steer us the wrong way a lot of the time. We should be living in a way that is true to our values. We should be living in a way that supports what is important to us and that allows us to care for ourselves and to nurture those that we love and to contribute to our communities. And that is true in the garden, and that's true outside of the garden as well. So if you are feeling like you ought to grow a specific kind of garden or specific things in the garden and that doesn't fit your diet or what you like to cook or your space or your time, then get rid of it and just grow something that brings you joy or that supplements your kitchen in some way. Anyway, those are just a few thoughts that I had for today. I hope that your fall gardening plans are progressing well and that you are getting lots of seeds started. I'm Kara from So Arizona. Thank you so much for watching. Until next time, happy gardening.